The problem with getting the word out, in quotation marks, is a problem with the reality of the information. Understanding consists of reality that people can agree on. An affinity or likingness for the other person, and the communication line itself. And the part of that that's out is the reality between people who make YouTube videos about the New World Order or anything like that. Is the general public has no reality on that. So their affinity for those kinds of people drops down, and they're not really interested in the communication. So it's still the duty of those who speak about this to keep on speaking about it. And fortunately, we're not interested in using violent means, because violence just begets more violence, and we know that. So, although it would be nice to go out and break something once in a while, we will carry on doing this. I just did a lecture about leadership, and there will be a part 2. And those of you who subscribe to me or follow these videos, it's time for you to take a more active role. There is kind of a humorous backstory to the New World Order and One World Government. We've had a One World Government here for at least 18,500 years, since Ra was kicked off the planet, and before that it was just in a different One World Government. So don't get too excited. The concept of nations with borders is just the latest in a long line of ideas. And I was told that it's the incoming generation of crystal and indigo beings who will be the ones who actually make the change. They're not going to put up with the way things have been. This shooting in the Batman premiere is, of course, an MK Ultra event, and that poor kid and his uncaptured accomplice, he's going to spend the rest of his life in jail so that no one can get to him and deprogram and find out what really happened. So he's being sacrificed. I was told that he was a major in some heavy-duty psychology kind of degree at university, and that his father is a patent holder in the same kind of technology that was being discussed in the movie. So who knows where that might lead. However, the reason for the shooting is Obama is trying to get a bill through so the United Nations can come into America and take the guns away from the private citizens, and he's 2 senators short of that. So of course there's a bloody public event to point out once again that guns are dangerous and they need to be taken away from the private citizens. I call this the news. I have some, in Canada here we have articles now about gun control and blah, blah, blah. This is propaganda that the public gets to see. The handguns are severely controlled, as they always have been. You have to have a genuine reason for having one. For example, I know a concert promoter, and he very often has $30,000 in cash in his briefcase, and he's trying to get home or to the bank. He needs a gun because everyone knows he's got it. So there's a genuine reason for having a pistol. Hunting rifles are not controlled here yet. There was an attempt to put something through called the Long Gun Registry. They're saying they just wanted to know who has them. So if the police come to a doorway on a domestic disturbance call or a burglary, they know there's a rifle in the building. That was the excuse, but it was the beginning of gun control. And the reason for gun control is this: a new world government is planning on culling the population. And historically, when you're going to do that, you have to get the weapons away from the public, because the only thing you can send to do that is other human beings, and they can be shot. And they have all the time in the world to do this, because they are making billions of dollars while we are making hundreds of dollars, and there's no reason for them to hurry. Their life is fine. It's not about the money for them, it's about having other people under their thumb suffering. That is their valuable final product. So it doesn't have to make sense to us. So they're taking their time. This started, I first noticed this a long time ago, 20, 30 years ago. California was so proud because they had put in a law that was restricting the semi-automatic weapons. And everywhere in every country in the world where they jump up and down about gun control and put in gun control, the only people's guns who are controlled are the private citizens, the criminals, arms dealers, drug dealers. They all continue to have guns and commit crimes with them. And supposedly the reason for gun control is to reduce crime. And statistically, when you take the guns away from the private citizens, the crime statistic goes up, because the citizens are defenseless. So it does not work. It is a lie. For example, our Prime Minister in Canada is going to get tough on crime. Okay. And Texas got tough on crime, and he didn't do anything. His crime statistics actually went up, and they stopped doing that, and they spent their money on rehabilitating the criminals, and the recidivism rate went way down. So that's obviously a better way to go, and I think Texas is such a huge state and commercial entity that maybe our Prime Minister or Justice Minister should be taking note of what other people do. They have these meetings, supposedly, where they get together and share information. However, saying I'm going to get tough on crime is good politics, good propaganda. There's stuff in the paper this morning. It's within 20 feet of me here somewhere. They're looking at gun control again. And it's just BS. It's the New World Order has phoned our Prime Minister and asked him to push the gun control agenda along a little bit, please. And other articles about we need to protect children on the internet from child molesters, which is more propaganda, BS. What they really are trying to do is stop people like me, for example, spreading news about the lies and corruption of the governments, and BS propaganda, trying to make the world less dishonest. And that's why they would want to do that. It's not to protect children. Most of these kinds of people, if you follow the news and collect clippings, as I do, eventually get caught either with underage children or prostitutes and cocaine. And I'm speaking of both sexes. The males are caught with young males, and the females are caught with young females. Child sex slavery is, I think, a $42 billion business worldwide now. You don't hear that much about it in the news. They're starting to do documentaries about it, but I think they're more to scare people and keep them in their box rather than to try to get a solution going. There's a couple of ladies, I won't mention them, I never out anybody unless they ask me to speak about them, who have sites, and their information is non-stop and high volume, and their problem with the world is the reality is so far out that they seem like they're insane, but they're not. And in planning this video, I was thinking this is going to kind of be in that arena, because the reality is so far out. Obama is a fatherless person, as was Bill Clinton. And these people are members of the Pharaonic dynasty out of Egypt, which is still running the world. They moved to Switzerland. And even though it's come up his birth certificate is not real and he's using a phony social insurance number and has apparently no background, nothing's been done about it. I have a couple of books on Hitler here, and I read through them. It took Hitler a long time, many years, to take over Germany. He did it step by step, piece by piece. He was jailed once on the way up because he went a little too fast, and eventually became chancellor, and then Germany became a totalitarian nightmare, to use a fun and romanticized phrase. This is what's happening to the United States of America. Your government's already gone, and because these people, as I said, have lots of money and can take their time, they're not suffering, not worrying about it. They're slowly changing the laws behind your back, and at some point they believe the public is going to wake up because of things like the internet, things like this you can see on the internet, putting out information on a worldwide basis that was formerly hidden and totally disbelieved because it had no reality. So the cross point, I don't know when the cross point will happen between people waking up and the vicious suppression of that, but they're planning for that. They're changing the laws so they can do that. They're changing the laws so the United Nations can come in and subdue the terrorists. Oh, I mean the citizens. The citizens are now terrorists. They've changed the law in that way. So there'll be nothing you can do legally. There'll be nothing that your army can say about what they're being asked to do because it's all legal. And everyone is an income tax slave, and that money goes to the British Empire, which has always owned America. And it's a tremendous amount of wealth, and they don't want that to stop. And from a long time ago, said they're willing to nuke 1 or 2 American cities to stop that from happening. They'll say it's something, aliens or the Russians, but they'll start bombing cities. So what to do about that? Those who listen to me and others like me, it's your possible task to upgrade your ability to communicate to those around you. And the secret to doing that is you're going to have to drop down a few levels of reality to get a conversation going about something that's real to them. When the shit hits the fan, you may suddenly find yourself in a leading position, because people that you spoke to who thought you were nuts will go, hey, wait a minute, that guy knew all about this, and they'll be knocking on your door saying, what do we do? And I hope you'll be ready with something. The time to do something about it legally is now. Well, you still have a legal framework. You can run for office. Back somebody half decent. Find anybody in the local law enforcement or military or National Guard who's of a freedom state of mind, and see what you can get going. That would be the right thing to do. The wrong thing to do is always to do nothing. I'm doing this. I wasn't doing this for the last, I guess 72 is when I would have first been capable of doing something like this. I'm doing it now. May not be the right thing to do or the best thing that I can do, but I'm doing something. And many other people are doing things like this, writing books. I was thinking when newspapers came out, they were probably the same kind of nightmare for the government that the internet is now, because most romanticized stories about newspaper owners is we want to tell the public the truth about what's going on around them. Most newspaper stories are about, if they're not, well, lately they've been disasters to make the public stay upset, but they used to be exposures of crimes, business crimes, and government corruption crimes. So now we have this internet, and we have governments trying to stop the internet or curb the internet, because there's too much information. For example, one woman in a 12 by 12 room was credited for putting together most of the beginning of the resistance in Egypt on her cell phone. That was not possible before. And one of the things that's been lost is countries are supposed to be about the people in the country enjoying being the people in the country, not the government of the country enjoying all the cash, drugs, hookers, wealth, property, and suppressing the people. The Greeks should enjoy being Greek, and the Chinese should enjoy being Chinese food, or being Chinese and eating Chinese food. The Russians should enjoy being Russian. They don't want to be Chinese. Let them be Russians. Everyone was having a fun with their national identity until the wealth was stolen to the point where everyone's just become a cog in the machine. And we don't have to have a planet like that. The new model has not been presented in toto, but there is the skeleton of it has been fleshed out. People will still have to make efforts and contribute. But as much of the labor as possible could be shunted over to machines, computers. And the price of goods and services could drop down to almost nothing. By taking the profit motive out of it the way it is. But not communism, which is always a trick. Saying, taking this flow, we should all be together here and work together. Yes, but it's the same old people doing the same old thing, and those at the top wind up with the Mercedes-Benz cars and the castles, while the workers are still making t-shirts at the factory. So no genuine leader has come forward and said this is the new model of the universe. I can't remember the name of there's a guy, I think he's in his 80s, he has the big skeleton of it. I can't remember what it's called, but he put out a 2-hour movie about it. But it's still, if you're going to build a high-rise, you have to have young men there pounding steel and pouring concrete. Only it'd be nice if they were happy to be there and making enough money so their life was rich and fulfilling. Throughout the last 50 years, I've talked to a lot of young men who have those kind of jobs with the hard hats, and they're all very aware that they work maybe 4 months of the year. All that money goes in income tax to the government, which is bad enough. And then now we're finding out that money's not even going to run a country. It's going to the New World Order, the banking elite, pharaonic overlords in Switzerland. Well, fake money is printed to fill in the gap, and apparently is going to come crashing down. And it will be the little people at the bottom who are going to wind up with no cabbages to eat. I have an acquaintance from Guatemala. He's a young guy, and he's up in Canada now enjoying the peace here. And he said in their small town they have the police with the jeeps with the 50 caliber machine guns on them, like we see in the movies. He said that is very real. But because the people there are a people, and they have neighbors and families, and they have a feeling of a nationhood, they barricade their neighborhoods with overturned cars and tables and stuff like in the movies, and they have husbands down there with very big guns, and they're able to keep the military police out of their neighborhood. And they know who these guys are as well, personally. So it is possible for the armed citizens to keep military forces from pushing you around, which is why they want to take your guns away from you, so you can't do that. And they will chase you down in the streets like a bunch of screaming pigs, and you will run like a bunch of screaming pigs, and it'll be a great day for them and a very soul-busting day for you. So take action before it comes to that. That is what they just love. That if it comes to that, you'll be fighting for your life, and they'll be enjoying it. I call this the hatred, as Lady Gaga calls her thing, the fame. The hatred that's pointed your way is astounding. From chemtrails to vaccinations to mercury in teeth fillings, genetically modified food, rat poison everywhere. Even this drink, pomegranate, is a natural a contraceptive for human beings, and now it's a concentrated drink. There's a reason for that. And up here is a kind of alcohol. You can get 2 liters for around $8. The one that's pomegranate is $7. So the poor people will buy that one. The hatred. Now, do you think with all the money they spent on chemtrails, all the gasoline for those planes, that they're not going to do the genocide? They're going to change their mind? For those of you who have not seen this, there's a man called COLIN who has the best chemtrail videos. And his suggestion is, if you don't think there's something going on with them, to take a glass of red wine and swish it around your mouth and leave it overnight, and you'll see the fibers, and they'll grow in there. It's very, very gross. Everyone has fibers in them. I think this is part of a 2-part weapon system, bioweapon. There is a way to put together 2 organisms where one organism would make you ill, but in the presence of the second organism, it just goes crazy. So this would consist of, say, a fungus of one kind and a virus. And the virus might give you the flu, but if the fungus is in you when the virus comes in, you wind up dying from ultra-severe pneumonia, to the point where the bottom of your lungs will dissolve from the immune system bringing in enzymes trying to kill the viruses, and actually the cells start to dissolve. That's the kind of thing that's I think it's being planned. I'm going to take you down the rabbit hole to places I've never taken you before. A decent war is fought over resources. There's not enough food around to feed your people, so you decide to go and declare war on your neighbors and take their stuff. An indecent war is where some psychopath just wants more power over more area because he's got things going on in his subconscious of which he's unaware, and control him. The people who generally wind up in charge of things are of this persuasion. And the technical term for this is tone level, meaning emotional tone level. And if you take a spirit and put it into a physical body at a 50-50 mix, you have a sane person. If you start pounding the spirit down into the flesh with pain, mental or physical, you get a lower and lower tone level. You get more matter and less spirit, so you get less spirituality and more matter, energy, space, time, illogical behaviors. For example, in my country, we just had a judge, female judge, her ex-husband put nude pictures of her wearing bondage gear on the internet. And this really undermines her credibility and might make it impossible for her to do her work. I think the legal system should do whatever it's got on the books for people who do things like that. But people who are of that sexual persuasion are quite low-toned, and I'm going to bring out a chart and show you that. We also had, same week, a mounted policeman was severely disciplined for having pictures of himself on the net in bondage gear choking women and generally advertising that that's what he was into. Again, someone interfering with his personal life. However, this is a thing called, on the tone scale, it's called punishing bodies. And in another city here, I know one of the constables there is in the S&M bondage club there. And we had a police chief here who was let go for questionable management. So he was moved over to the next city rather than being fired. And after a time where they thought everyone had forgotten about this, he was up for police chief there, and everybody said, no, not that guy. He's not a good guy to be a police chief. He's a little too wild and crazy. So they waited another year, I think, and he's now the police chief there, because everyone's forgotten. And he's just been lately through a firearms procedure violation. And he's the police chief and should know better. However, if you're looking for justice, you're not looking for a low-toned person whose bent is punishing bodies, because of course punishing bodies is putting them in handcuffs, beating them with sticks, jailing them for years. This is punishing bodies, which is not a very civilized way of dealing with a criminal who, after all, is obviously a damaged person, whether damaged in this lifetime or damaged from a previous lifetime. He needs reconstructive therapy, of which this civilization is not capable. So we warehouse them in jails, and I'm sure that, say that somebody warehoused in a jail, their income tax value per their birth certificate is probably differently allocated. And I think this is the real reason for the 7 lifetime sentences, because the person's not going to live that long. But I think the administrative and cash money aspect of that person's birth certificate has some hidden use that we haven't been told about yet. Also, in my lifetime, I've heard of judges on the bench wearing full female underwear attire under their robes. while they're working on the bench. I have a friend who's passed away now, who's had a judge for a boyfriend, and she used to go into court and sit in the front row and tease him by opening up her skirt and flashing him. And this is not something that should be going on while your next 5 years in or out of jail is in question. So this field of justice has attracted some of these people who are at this emotional tone level called punishing bodies. And it's a dangerous situation for anyone to get in their line of fire. And it's the same with governments. They're when they become totalitarian, they're into stopping, controlling, and punishing bodies, because bodies are bad, because they move and they speak and they do things, and that has to be stopped. A few months back we had article after article appearing in the newspaper about sexual misbehaviors in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The big bad superior officers were suppressing the women and forcing them into compromising situations. And every second day there was a new revelation, and women coming out and saying, yes, it's also happening to me. And then they thought, this corruption goes all the way to the top and we have to do something about this, and we need a top dog who's not an actual policeman, so the public has control over this. The real reason for this was their 20-year contract to be the police force in British Columbia was up, and they were negotiating the next 20 years. And the newspaper was being used to slam them and make them look bad, to help the province keep the price down, in my opinion. And after all the noise of a non-police top dog, the new head of the RCMP nationwide is a former policeman. And the guy they had in before that, who was not a policeman, was let go, and they actually said he's too honest and forthcoming to have this position. And then he was smeared for having an attitude problem. Interesting stuff. So now there isn't a single word in the newspapers about following up on all these sexual improprieties in the police. I own a huge tome on this area called the tone scale, and I don't know how much of this I will bring in, but I think it's important that I talk about the sexual perversion aspect and justice and honesty aspects. In this current culture, sexual aberration is very high. Anything which is hidden and highly regulated in a culture will become aberrated. There is considerable confusion in the American and European cultures about sex. Since there was so much perversion and promiscuity and maltreatment of children, the erroneous conclusion was reached that the remedy for this lay in further regulation, whereas in reality, it was the regulation which caused the derangement of the dynamic. It will be noted in observing the behavior of human beings and on the tone scale that promiscuity, perversion, sadism, and irregular practices fall far down the line. Free love falls also in this very low band, since man is relatively monogamous, and since it is non-survival not to have a well-ordered system for the creation and upbringing of children by families. A society which falls into this low band of the tone scale can be expected to abuse sex, to be promiscuous, to misuse and maltreat children, and to act, in short, much in the way current cultures are acting. It is of vital importance, if one wishes to stop immorality and the abuse of children, to de-aberrate the society for the whole group of the society, to say nothing of individuals. At lower bands of the tone scale, we begin to get a disgust for sex, a revulsion towards sex, mostly when irregularly practiced. A little lower down, we find sex appearing as rape. We find the sexual act being performed as punishment. A little lower down, we enter the area of the most vicious reversal. Here we have promiscuity, perversion, sadism, and irregular practices. We have no enjoyment of the sex act, but a hectic anxiety about it. The sex act cannot truly be enjoyed whether performed regularly or irregularly. Here is free love, easy marriage and quick divorce, and general sexual disaster. People at this level are intensely dangerous in a society, since aberration is contagious. A society which reaches this level is on its way out of history, as went the Greeks, as went the Romans, as goes modern European and American culture. Here is a flaming danger signal which must be heeded if a race is to go forward. At a little lower down, we have impotency and anxiety about sex, with only occasional efforts to procreate. For people really low down here, the organs of sex become relatively useless. Indeed, this tone scale is closely applicable to the endocrine activity of the individual and form and condition of the physical body. The low-toned woman who in her teens will not have a well enough developed pelvic structure or endocrine system to permit her bearing children with ease. Difficult births are a normal result of too long a residence in a low band of the tone scale during the formative period of the body. This is where you get the people who are having the cesarean sections. Easy births can only be expected with women who are relatively high on the tone scale. It is noteworthy that low levels of the tone scale finds the muscles, particularly the sexual muscles, without tonus. The nymphomaniac and the satyr are extremely slack-muscled, and the tonus is almost non-existent. Life is defined in cytology, or the study of cells, as an unending stream of protoplasm from the beginning of life until now. Down through the ages, as a continuous genetic stream, this protoplasm is modified by natural selection and environmental conditioning, as well as by what seems to be outright planning from generation to generation. Because life is so dependent upon this lifeline, it is very easy to place too great an emphasis on the sexual act, the thing that keeps this lifeline in a continuous stream. The second part of this dynamic concerns itself with children, the product of sex. There is a gradient of reaction towards children from the top to the bottom of the tone scale, which can be used to place a person properly, and then you'll know how they behave. At the bottom end, we enter the band of brutal treatment of children, heavy corporal punishment, the forcing of the child into a mold with pain, breaking his dramatizations and upsets about his noise. And upsets about his noise and clatter. There may be two reactions to children. There may be an actual and immediate desire for children as a manifestation of sex. But we also may have the use of children for sadistic purposes, and we may find both of these in the same individual. We have a long-term general neglect of children with an occasional sporadic interest in them. We have very little thought for the child's future or the culture in which the child will grow up. A little lower down, we have mainly an anxiety about children, fear that they will be hurt, fear of this and fear of that concerning children, and a hopelessness about their future. A mother will attempt the abortion of her child, and any woman who will abort a child, save only if the child threatens her physical life, lies very low on the tone scale. She can be expected to be unreliable, inconstant, and promiscuous. The child is looked upon as evidence of this promiscuity. It is notable as one glances down this column that an interest in children includes an interest not only in the bearing of the child, but the child's well-being, happiness, mental state, education, and general future. We may have a very low-tone person who seems very anxious to produce a child. Once the child is born, we may have an interest in it as a plaything or a curiosity, but following this we get general neglect and thoughtlessness about the child, and no feeling whatever about the child's future or any effort to build one for it. We get careless familial actions such as promiscuity, which will tear to pieces the family security upon which the child's future depends. Along this band, the child is considered a thing, possession. A little higher than this, the child is a target for the dramatizations which the individual does not dare execute against grown-ups in the environment. A last-ditch effort to be in command of something. Here we have a domination of the child with a constant warping of its character. The whole future of the race depends upon its attitude towards children, and a race which specializes in women for menial purposes, or which believes that the contest of the sexes in the spheres of business and politics is a worthier endeavor than the creation of tomorrow's generation, is a race which is dying. We have in the woman who is an ambitious rival of the man in his own activities, a woman who is neglecting the most important mission she may have. A society which looks down upon this mission, and in which women are taught anything but the management of a family, the care of men, and the creation of the future generation, is a society which is on its way out. The historian can peg the point where a society begins its sharpest decline at the instant when women begin to take part on an equal footing with men in political and business affairs, since this means that the men are decadent and the women are no longer women. This is not a sermon on the role or position of women. It is a statement of bald and basic fact. When children become unimportant to a society, that society has forfeited its future. Even beyond the fathering and bearing and rearing of children, a human being does not seem to be complete without a relationship with a member of the opposite sex. This relationship is the vessel wherein is nurtured the life force of both individuals, whereby they create the future of the race in body and thought. If man is to rise to greater heights, then woman must rise with him, or even before him. But she must rise as woman, and not as today she's being misled into rising as a man. It is the hideous joke of frustrated, unvirile men to make women over into the travesty of men, which men themselves have become. Men are difficult and troublesome creatures, but valuable. The creative care and handling of men is an artful and a beautiful task. Those who would cheat women of their rightful place by making them into men should at last realize that by this action they are destroying not only the women, but the men and the children as well. This is too great a price to pay for being modern, or for somebody's petty anger or spite against the female sex. The arts and skills of woman, the creation and inspiration of which she is capable, and which here and there in isolated places in our culture she still manages to affect, in spite of the ruin and decay of man's world which spreads around her, must be brought newly and fully into life. These arts and skills and creation and inspiration are her beauty, just as she is the beauty of mankind.